I'm Elisa Parker. It's the Wild and Scenic Film Festival here in downtown Nevada City and also Grass Valley, California. We are based in the Sierras, and the Yuba River is our key river, and it has our heart here. And actually, it was really the reason Circle is Circle, which is the key producer and presenter of this incredible festival. We've been connecting all weekend with just phenomenal people, and whether they are filmmakers or storytellers or featured in the film, or even biologists, scientists, like we have Daniel Taylor here with us today. And as we wrap up this weekend in the Media Lounge, one of our favorite creatures is bats, and this is called The Story of Bacanora. Bacanora, is that right? Did I get that right, Daniel?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to simplify things, Bacanora is actually mezcal, an agave distillate, just like tequila. Very similar to tequila. But if you make it in Sonora, the state of Sonora, you have to call it Bacanora.
It's almost like champagne in France.
It's denomination control. It's legal that you have to call it Bacanora. And it was illegal for 100 years. So it was like reveneurs.
Why was it illegal?
People still made it.
Of course they did. Why was it illegal?
Just the whole anti-alcohol thing.
Okay.
It probably started back in our prohibition days.
Yeah.
And maybe the government wasn't making money off it either.
Well, that could change everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, mezcal is super hot everywhere. And we were saying, like everyone knows, it's just like a little smokier tequila. But you are in this for bats.
So what is the connection? Here's the connection. And the story of Bacanora is a microcosm of a much bigger program, an agave restoration program that we're directing with lots of partners, both in the U.S. and Mexico. And that is to restore native agave species. And in our case, as a bat conservation organization, batcon.org, our whole mission is to end bat extinctions. So, there's a quarter of all the mammals on the planet are bats, over 1,400 species. And, of course, incredibly important, about $5 billion of agricultural pest control, including here in California with almonds and a lot of the crops. And they pollinate many.
They're cross-pollinators.
Yes, they're cross-pollinators. So back to the agave. So the Bacanora, the mezcal that's grown, and the wild agave plants are pollinated by bats. There's two bats in particular, the lesser long-nosed bat, that is mostly along the north-central Mexico up the west coast, and then the Mexican long-nosed bat, which is listed federally endangered both Mexico and the U.S. The lesser long-nosed bat, the one from more western Mexico, though they do overlap in north-central Mexico, it was recently delisted, but it's probably something we need to keep our eyes on. So both of those bats pollinate wild agave as well as agave that's grown in crops. So if you didn't have the bats, simply, you wouldn't have genetic diversity of the agave plants. There's about 150 species of agave in Mexico. Yeah. So what happens though is if you are a mezcalero and you are making tequila, two things. One is you harvest the plant before it sends up its stalk, because that's when it has the most sugars. Okay. But its stalk and the flowers are what supports the bats. And these bats, the mothers, heavily pregnant, fly 1,600 kilometers round trip from north central Mexico up through the eastern mountains of Mexico and the western coastal plain and foothills of Mexico to the U.S., where they raise their young or give birth, and then when the young can fly, in the fall they migrate back to Mexico.
I never thought of that. It was them as being
migratory. And that was the film, The Story of Bacanora, focused on one of our colleagues and friends, Osvaldo Coronado, a small farmer. We learned of what was going on there with this, explosion of of agave sonora And this is agave augustifolia is what they use for making mezcal or Bacanora and Sonora. And there's some wonderful young Mexican scientists, Colectivo Sonora Silvestre, and we've supported them. And they're working with the government of Sonora and these agave growers to do a sustainable agave production. Now, the other thing about agave is in the U.S., when we think of agave, we think of mezcal and tequila. But in Mexico, it's living fences, it's agua miel, which is like a
Right.
sugar. It's roasted to eat. It's fed to cattle. It's part of Latin American culture and prehistoric, going back thousands of years.
Right, right.
Mahuel was the goddess of agave. And so this program now, we're working with ejidos in Nuevo León, about a dozen ejidos, and it's all about what this festival is about, which is resilience and the planet. So we're working with people to start their own greenhouses and then planting these agaves in the places where these bats would migrate through to create these stepping stones, because they follow the bloom from south to north, and then they follow the bloom, another bloom, from north back south. And without that agave trail, that nectar trail, they won't make it.
Is there like fund support to make, like so you're encouraging people to plant agave, but what does
Yes.
that process look like for the community engagement piece?
Yes, they also can grow other things in the greenhouses, and they're making and selling mezcal from the plants. But they're letting some of the plants go to flower, and that's the whole part of this story.
Right.
Right. These farmers didn't realize that bats were a big part of it, because the agaves will grow from a pup, they call it, but it's genetically the same as the parent. But if you want good genetics, it has to go to seed, and the bats can take that pollen and that seed hundreds of miles.
So have you, like, as a biologist, have you been studying bats? Like, has this been your primary focus, Daniel?
My mom took me to see bats fly down the street, and I think I was about 7 years old.
And where?
And Pennsylvania, eastern
Okay.
Pennsylvania. And I've been a biologist for 40 years. And so, yeah, I love bats. They're amazing animals, very, very incredible animals.
What do you love most about bats?
That they fly. They're the only true flying mammals. Yeah.
How
yeah.
insane
They're
is that,
awesome.
right?
Yeah.
And being migratory, too.
And being migratory, and they can live 30, 40 years. People don't
Wow.
realize that. They only have one pup per year. So that's why one of the reasons they face so much endangerment.
They're like, they're wisdom keepers
They're
of the
incredible.
mammals. Huh.
Yeah.
Are they adaptable? I mean, living that long, like how adaptable
Yeah.
are
They're adaptable, but like so many things, wild things now, they adapt it to natural processes, not the human-caused climate change. So it's definitely affecting them, as well as introduced disease.
Right.
So yeah, it's a battle. But this idea of in my 40 years of doing wildlife work, I've never been involved in a project where we're actually planting the food for the animal that will save that animal.
Yes, yes. So for someone watching this, right, what can we all do? I mean, especially if we're
Yeah.
not necessarily connected to an
Right.
agave plant.
I would Google bat-friendly tequila or bat-friendly mezcal.
Bat-friendly tequila.
Yeah, or bat-friendly
Okay.
mezcal, and see if you can find people that are
Are
producing
they
it. that say-
labeled like that? Are they?
They're trying to get that together. It's
Okay.
kind of new. It's kind of new and kind of growing. And then here in the U.S., in this part of the country, water is important for them. Pooled water, they have to drink almost every night. So if you have a little pond or building a little pond for wildlife, that'll take care of them.
Awesome.
And the rivers, a lot of talks here about rivers and river systems. Those are real important for foraging and migration as well.
Awesome.
Cool
Okay.
stuff.
That's great.
Yep.
Well, we look forward to seeing you again
You bet.
at Wild and
I'll be
Scenic
back.
Film Fest. What have you loved most about this festival?
Oh my God, the diversity of devoted people and so much knowledge and so many people working so hard to make the planet a better place and resilience, especially young people. It provides a lot of hope. You need some hope
We
nowadays.
do need hope, and that is what Wild and Scenic provides.
Yep.
And Daniel Taylor, it's so nice to connect with you here. It's an inspiration, and it's like a reason to care and a solution to do. It's, as we said this year in our theme with Wild and Scenic, it's real action, and we hope in listening to all these stories and watching the films that you feel inspired. It's all about showing up in the best way possible for yourself, being in your lane, but we're all interconnected.
Absolutely.
I'll wave over and say hi to
Absolutely.
Daniel, and
Yay.
I hope you do the same. I want to thank our extraordinary crew. We have Tara and Brendan and Catherine and Jim and Mark and Kim, and of course all of our volunteers. We have hundreds of volunteers who help make this festival a reality. And I'm
incredible.
Elisa Parker, and it's always an honor to connect with you. And we will be back for Wild and Scenic next year.
I'll be back.
He's going to be back.
Yay.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again.